Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And the last programme of this year. And what a year it's been. I've certainly not known one like it in my lifetime, and I suspect that none of you have either. But there has been one constant, and that is our gardens. And I suspect the one thing we've learned above all else as far as gardens go is that it's not been so much a case of us looking after our gardens as our gardens looking after us. Coming up on today's programme, we visit RHS Harlow Carr in Yorkshire to celebrate a garden planted specifically for winter that shines out even in the bleakest of months.
Every plant has got to work really hard, so things to consider would be form, texture, colour and scent, and if it's got all of those things then you're onto a winner.
We meet the twin brothers who will stop at nothing to realise their dream of growing a world record-breaking pumpkin.
Pumpkin growers do sort of call it a pumpkin sickness, something you need to see a doctor about actually.
It's a drug. And as it's Halloween tomorrow night, it's high time that I harvested my pumpkins. Although we haven't yet had any seriously cold weather here at Longmeadow, it will come, even with climate change. We still get a number of days in winter where it drops below -5, and that is enough to kill a lot of the tender plants, the ones that come from near the equator. And you can see we've got tithonias here, there's cosmos, we've got dahlias, and we've got cannas. Now, if you live in a fairly warm part of the country, sort of south of Oxford, and you've got free draining soil, your dahlias will probably be fine if you leave them outside. You cut back the tops, mulch them really well, and they should come back next spring. But here, where it's very wet, then we have to lift them, because the combination of wet and cold is no good for dahlias at all, and they rot. I won't worry about the annuals. The cosmos and the tithonias will die back, they'll go to the compost heap, they will have performed their services and will start all over again next year. But the cannas do need to be lifted and brought in. What I would say is this is not an emergency. It doesn't matter if the leaves are blackened, as long as the roots aren't frosted, they will survive. So as long as you do it sometime in the next few weeks, you'll be fine. Now, this is one called Wyoming. It's actually very small. It's the smallest here in the Jewel Garden, but all of them need dealing with in the same way, which is to dig up the roots, doing as little damage to them as you possibly can. There you go. Oh, it's in two parts. Okay. So this comes out the ground, into the barrow. Having lifted it, I'm going to show you how best to prepare it for winter and then store it so you can plant it out next spring when the last frost has gone and it will grow really fast. Come on now. Good girl. Cannas are actually quite easy to store and look after as long as you understand that these are plants that mustn't dry out. The first thing to do is to cut off the top growth, about 6 inches above the rhizome. Now these new leaves here, it always seems a shame to cut them off, but actually they can go too. Sometimes I store cannas in trays, line them with newspaper, and then if you have a number of the same variety, you can just put them in cheek by jowl. I could probably get 2 or 3 in there, but I'm going to use the pot for this one. And I have got old potting compost mixed with a bit of fresh leaf mould. By and large, I always say don't reuse potting compost, but it's perfectly good to store dahlias or cannas in. So I'm going to put a little bit of this underneath. pop this on top, like that, and then we will just fill in round the gaps. Just enough to cover the rhizomes. The whole point of this is just to protect the rhizomes from drying out and getting frosted. But if you had sand, that would do the job. And last year we stored all our dahlias with scrunched up newspaper around them, and they were very happy. The important thing is they go somewhere cool but frost-free, and dark and not too dry. A shed is fine, and we found that they store very well under the staging in the greenhouse. And the great thing about being in the greenhouse is that it's easy to water them, which you do need to do about once a month. And one final tip is don't forget to label each and every one of them, because it's really hard to identify a canna just from a stub like this. Well, that is now the end of the canna season, but we've still got plenty of autumnal fire blazing from the trees. And last November, Francis went to Surrey to celebrate a magnificent autumnal display.
Winkworth Arboretum, set in a glorious valley, with over 1,000 different trees and shrubs, sweeping vistas, a magnificent lake, and the most exquisite autumnal colour. This was the vision of Dr. Wilfred Fox, who in the 1930s embarked on this grand scheme, knowing that he would never get to see it in its full glory. He passionately believed that trees can enhance all our lives, and so set about planting them for future generations to enjoy. And it's trees chosen specifically for their autumn colour which are the most celebrated. Species from all over the world give a kaleidoscopic display of colour from September right through to November. Dr. Fox believed in going big and bold. Of course, beautiful autumn colour isn't just for our delight. The gradual change in colour and the eventual dropping of the leaves is the tree's response to the shorter days and cooler temperatures of the season. In nature, leaves tend to be green. And that is because they contain chlorophyll, which is green in colour. Now, chlorophyll is present in the leaf and it harnesses energy from the sun, turning it into plant food, and that's photosynthesis. But as the days get shorter and the temperatures drop, senescence is triggered in the tree, which is the process by which it begins to lose its leaves. And when that happens, chlorophyll production goes down. Eventually, it stops altogether, which means other pigments already present in the leaf have a chance to be revealed. If the chlorophyll breaks down to reveal yellow or orange, it's because of a group of pigments called carotenoids. Now, they're there all year round, but we don't see them because they're masked by the chlorophyll. And it's a very common pigment. It's found in all kinds of things, from daffodils, bananas, carrots, and even things like egg yolks and canaries. If the leaf is red or purple, that's because of anthocyanins. Now, they're produced in much greater quantity throughout the autumn, and no one knows exactly why. It's been hotly debated over recent years, but some people think it might be to protect the leaf as the chlorophyll breaks down. The main reason why deciduous trees change colour and go dormant is to conserve energy and water. During the cold winter months, there's no point in having leaves that can't photosynthesise, or run the risk of being destroyed by frost. Whatever may be going on in the complex but wonderful world of plant science, we get to enjoy all of this beautiful colour. And if yellow and orange is your thing, then luckily here a vast majority of our native tree species display just those colours. And one such tree which does it beautifully is a beech. Just look at this magnificent tree. Shades of golden, shades of bronze, and everything in between are here. And the great news is that they will hold onto those leaves all the way through the winter. So you have beautiful, vibrant greens in the spring and then deep browns all through the winter. This is obviously huge for any normal-sized garden, but you can clip it to be a really tiny hedge so everyone can enjoy them. Native to North America is the liquid amber. It's renowned for putting on a striking display in autumn, when its leaves turn beautiful shades of red, orange and purple. Its deeply lobed leaves may look like a maple, but when crushed, they have a lovely smell. They can get quite big, but if you have the space, they're stunning. For a magnificent show of yellow, the tulip tree is hard to beat. Its leaves have a very distinctive shape, and in spring, its lemon green flowers are a favourite with the bees. For something a little unusual, deciduous larches offer a completely different feel to the autumn landscape. With short needles running along their branches, they may resemble a pine tree in summer, but as the days shorten, they turn to a haze of yellow. They can be huge, but you can buy much smaller varieties for your garden. If you're looking for an explosion of reds, then you need to look to North American and Asian species. And there is nothing more iconic than a Japanese maple for that. It's absolutely glorious. Look at the translucent, lovely palmate leaves. And even when they fall, you have that beautiful carpet on the floor and you're left with an incredible form of tree. It's just so stunning, even with no leaves on it at all. The lovely thing about these, although these are about probably 70 years old at least, they're quite big, but generally they're quite small trees and they're incredibly slow growing, great for containers, so really good for your garden. And they'll even thank you for being there because they like it a little bit sheltered. Trees have another trick up their sleeves. As all those valuable resources are drained from the leaves, a special layer of cells form just where the leaf stalk or petiole hits the stem, and it's called the abscission layer. Once senescence is over, the leaf will drop, and if you stop and listen, you can hear them falling all around you. Dr. Wilfred Fox died in 1962, aged 87, having secured the future of Winkworth Arboretum, allowing future generations to enjoy the sheer beauty of trees in autumn.
I've never been to Winkworth Arboretum, but seeing how beautiful it is, Francis has filled me full of envy and I'm definitely going to try and go there. But I've got Nellie, who's adopting her autumnal colours. She gets distinctly more russet coloured as we go into autumn. Go on, get down, there's a good girl. Although the trees at the Arboretum were absolutely fantastic, you don't actually need full-blown trees to have really good autumn colour. Here in the damp garden, the Viburnum plicatum marisii has the most intense colour of the whole garden and can turn almost a kind of chocolate brown before the leaves fall. And then behind it, you've got the cornus and the fabulous Hamamelis, which is splayed with oranges and yellows and completely fiery colour. So shrubs will give you that autumnal display just as well as big trees. Now, most of us have had some really difficult times this year, and certainly some more than others, but I think most of us who have gardens have found new ways in which the garden supports and sustains and inspires us. And our first film from your gardens this week comes from Anya Spence-Page and her garden in Twickenham.
Hello, my name's Anya, and this is Bertie. We believe that if you look after your garden will look after you. When I had a really difficult start to the year and I was diagnosed with cancer back in February, I knew that my garden was going to be more important to me than ever. But I also knew that I'd have to do things very differently. So I let my friends look after my allotment, and I gathered up all my pots and packets of seeds and brought them back to the house. And I just had a go at seeing what I could do. And this is the results. This is a variety of salad, and it's called cloche or greenhouse cold blend, and specifically for going through the winter. So again, I planted this just last week, and already there's tiny little green shoots. But the birds around here seem to love salad, so I'm just going to pop this cloche on. I know it's a little bit big, but it doesn't matter, it will do the job, just to give them a little bit more protection. And it'll also keep Bertie from having a little snuffle in there too. There's one more thing that I'd like to show you, but for that we're going to have to go upstairs. Basil, chilies, peppers, all being grown in the bathroom. And best of all, above the sink, wrapping around the sink, tomatoes. Who needs a greenhouse? Fantastic.
Anya's bathroom looked delicious, but I guess it must be very nice and light for tomatoes to ripen, that's for certain. Now, outside, the vegetable garden has been good this year. I'm still waiting to harvest my first celeriac. The chicory looked a little bit dodgy. It got dry in the summer, but then I watered them and they're coming through nicely. And the brassica, the purple sprouting broccoli, the cavolo nero, the cabbages are shaping up to be better than ever. But now it's time to plant fruit rather than veg, because I've got here some strawberries. These are bare root plants that are becoming available about now, and all bare root plants tend to be planted in their dormant season. This is a variety called Cambridge Favourite. It's an old, long-standing variety and a really good one if you've not grown strawberries before, because they're utterly reliable. It might lose its leaves if it is really cold, but if we have a mild winter, they will stay on. Now, I'm growing strawberries in a trough this year rather than in the soil. I've mixed up a potting mixture which has got some grit in it, it's got leaf mould, lots of garden compost, so that there'll be plenty of goodness, because strawberries do well in a rich, well-drained soil. Right, on top of that, I've got a bucket of sieved compost, which I'm going to add just to give it an extra boost. Whether you're planting your strawberries in an old cattle trough, a raised bed, a hanging basket, a window box, or a big open field, resist the temptation to plant them too closely together, because you'll get much more fruit if you have really strong, healthy plants. And they need a surprising amount of space. So I'm going to pop these in along the front and back of the trough. Plant it so that the soil level is just at the neck of the plant where the roots join. And I'm going to give that, in this space, about 18 inches, like that. And that's plenty close enough. And if this was in open ground, I'd have wider spacing. I'll keep those well watered, and Cambridge Favourite, one of the earliest to fruit, and if the weather is good, we should be harvesting those round about midsummer. And if you've never grown strawberries before, give it a go. Now, we've got the opportunity to rejoin Eunice McGee Belgrave as she looks back on a long life spent in gardening.
My love of gardening came from my parents in Jamaica. They dig the earth, they plant the vegetables, then they take it to the markets and they sold it, they got the money, and they look after the family. Because of the teaching that I get from home and my grandmother, I remember when she knocked on the door and she says, "You're going to England, you obey the rules and live." That's what she said. Until this day, I remember that. Gardening has given me health, really good health. It teaches me to be self-sufficient, to be hardworking. And I'm telling you, if I was not out here in this garden, I would be sitting in a armchair or into a home or something. What you plant, you eat. You know, you breathe in the fresh air, your lungs get well. There is always goodness coming from it, really. But I started in the 1960s to do community action work, all by myself. A garden project was developed for educational and basic life skills, educational purposes, to learn kids about gardening. So the first thing I did, I got the allotment, and then I started writing to the schools around to see if they wanted the children to come along. And that was it. They just came. They just came. Yes, hello. How are you? All right. Very nice to see you again. Yes. The young people, their response were marvelous. They said, "I like this better than sitting around television." And they were just so they were on fire, man. They liked the digging and the weeding. They loved it. They loved it. The teachers themselves loved it. And it was 5 days a week on the allotment for 10, 15 years. Have a look at it. See how small they are? And this we put in here like that. In 2014, I thought, do I let it go or do I continue? So I decided to take it home, to take the work that I was doing in the allotment home, starting my own garden. And I did get the same response as I had through the allotments. So here we are. At 83, I'm still doing it. Now we are going to plant some onions. We have 2 onions here to plant.
Yeah.
And how do you think we should plant the onions then? Yeah?
We should plant the onion like that.
No, that's the wrong way of planting the onions. The roots are here. This is the roots. And this is, yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't get an onion at the end of the crop. You know what I mean? Most of the children who come down to the garden project are shy when they're coming in. But of course, as time goes on, they change, and they change for the better. So this is how we would plant the onion, just in there, and then we cover it. Come and get your onions. Here you go. Yeah. They have planted it, they grow it, they see its growth, they are tasting it now, they know what it's all about. And when they go out on the street, they keep on telling other children and bringing other people in because they are having a good time. It's about mixing with each other, really. These children find that they could relate to me, they could talk to me, and I could help them to progress their education. Their parents now found out that I'm the best thing that ever happened to them. Most of them, their lives has been changed. This is runner beans, and this is how you open the pod to get the runner beans out. Here we go. And these are ready to cook. And
I think Eunice is really amazing. She's always positive and she's fabulous.
It's encouraged me to probably plant my own crops in my garden at home and help my little nephews and nieces as our plant.
When she talks to me, I feel happy and I feel like I just want to do all the work that she has done.
Over the years, I can tell you now, it's thousands and thousands of children that I have mentored that make good of themselves through the horticultural garden project. As long as I live, I will be doing what I'm doing now, continually.
I'm happy to report that Eunice is still gardening, still working with her community, and still the most amazing inspiration for all of us. Now, we have reached the point when, if there's a little bit of wind, the leaves stream off the trees. And what I would say is that although it's good to leave piles of leaves under hedges, under shrubs, and that gives cover for animals over winter, if you've got an open space, whether it's a lawn or a path, do collect them up. And you're not doing it just to tidy up, but this is a rich harvest because leaves, when they break down, make leaf mold, and you can use that for the garden because leaf mold added to potting compost or used as a mulch on woodland plants in particular is a real bonus to the garden. And the secret of making good leaf mold is to gather up the leaves and ideally chop them up. Now, the easiest way to do that is if you've got a mower, simply mow them. Also, it's good to make sure they're damp. And then if you've got space, make a bay to store them in. Chicken wire is ideal, but it doesn't matter what you make it out of. And just heap the leaves up in it and leave them alone. And you can make leaf mold in bin bags. Make a few holes in the bottom of the bag just in case there's a lot of moisture because you don't want them sitting in a puddle. And then fold over the top of the bag, put it out the way, it can go behind a shed, and again you can forget about it until next autumn. And that way all these fallen leaves will add richness and goodness to your garden. Now, still to come on today's programme. We meet two brothers vying to be crowned as world record-breaking pumpkin kings. But first, we're going to visit another of your gardens. And this takes us to Holland, and the garden of Joris van Giel.
Hi, my name is Joris. I'm from the Netherlands and I want to show you our garden. We only started the garden 1.5 years ago. We love a natural look, and we have mainly achieved this by using a lot of ornamental grasses and the mixing of various plants. We like beautiful combinations of colors, heights and structures of leaves. For me, it's also a challenge to ensure that the garden remains interesting all year round and that there are flowers somewhere in the garden. And this attracts a lot of insects like bumblebees, bees and butterflies. It gives a wonderful buzz during the day. We also like to collect seeds from our plants and sow new plants for next year. The lichens already have a lot of seeds and we keep these in an envelope inside until we can sow them. The poppies have a lot of seed in one seed head, enough for our garden. These beautiful seeds are from the cornflowers. We can collect them and sow directly outside in the garden next year. As you can see, we are very fond of flowers and plants and enjoy every day of this beautiful garden. It's our paradise.
Joris's garden does show how that if you collect seeds, it gives you a huge stock of plants and costs nothing. It's certainly something that every gardener can do. And now we have come, and it seems like a long wait, to tulip planting time. Tulips are best left until November and December. And the reason for that is that they are prone to a fungal problem called tulip fire. By leaving it later, there is much less risk of the spores, if there are any in your soil, infecting the bulbs. And I'm going to plant in a galvanised old tub. And the bottom has rotted out of this one. You can see here that there are great big holes, which means that it's no good at all for holding moisture of any kind, but perfect for tulips, because the key to success in growing tulips is good drainage. So I've got a load of crocks. Whoa, they're heavy. And I'm going to cover the bottom in these. Right, so that's a layer of crocks along the bottom. I've made a mix here which has got a lot of grit in it. It's got some normal peat-free compost, some leaf mould, and quite a lot of sieved garden compost, because a bit of extra nutrition will do them good. So I'm going to plant this in layers. This is one of my favourite tulips. It's a triumph tulip called Negrita. It's got a purple flower on a long stem, and this will rise up through. So I'm putting this at the lower level and putting them a couple of inches apart around the edge. So that's a layer of Negrita. I will cover that up. And I'm going to plant the next layer. This is another triumph tulip called Princess Irene. And it's got wonderful orange petals flush with a mauvey, lavendery purple, which will pick up on the colour of the Negrita. It's slightly shorter, so the Negrita will grow above it. Both being of the Triumph series, they will flower at roughly the same time, which, depending where you are and what the weather is like, will be sometime from mid-April into the second week of May. When you're planting tulips in layers, whether it's 2 layers like this or even 3 or 4, don't worry about putting a bulb on top of another bulb. They will find their way through. It's extraordinary how they work their way in between each other. So we've got a layer there. We'll cover that up. Now, if you're planting directly into the borders, there are 2 ways of doing it. You can either just go an inch or so below the surface and they will flower perfectly well, but they won't come back so well next year. If you want them to last longer, or have a better chance of lasting longer, then plant tulips as deep as you can. Now for the final layer, which are these wallflowers. Wallflowers make really good companions to tulips. They flower at the same time, and of course the wallflowers have this amazing honeyed fragrance, but they also have colours that are as vibrant and as strong as tulips. Now this is one called Sunset Orange, which will give real fire and obviously pick up of the orange of Princess Irene. These are very nice healthy plants. So that's there, and then in amongst it I've got a Scarlet Bedder. And the Bedder series, which are Victorian, are really reliable and good. You can get Orange Bedder, Scarlet Bedder, there's a lovely Primrose Bedder. And these, of course, won't do much between now and February, and we'll start to see the tulip shoots round about then, and it will all come together in a glorious fanfare of colour at the first week of May. But you don't have to wait that long for colour. In fact, you don't have to wait for spring at all. You can introduce colour into your winter garden. And earlier this year, we went to Yorkshire to visit the RHS gardens at Harlow Carr, and in particular, their winter garden.
For me, I guess one of the most important things about the winter garden is colour and mixing lots of different colours together. I don't think the same rules apply like they would herbaceous border in the summer, where you might want it to be more complementary. I think you can jazz it up a bit more because you want it to be as colourful as possible in what could be the dullest time of the year. So I've been at RHS Garden Hire Car for 15 years, and for 14 years of that I've been looking after the winter garden. Back then it was just the very bare bones. I was tasked with finishing it off and bringing it forward, and it's been a really great thing for me because as a season, beforehand I didn't really like winter. I like the warmer months of the year. But by looking after this area of the garden and growing all the plants that look their best in the winter months, it's really helped me to love winter as a season and to actually look forward to it coming around. So for me, every plant has got to work really hard, and that's particularly important if you're working with quite a small space. So things to consider would be form, texture, colour and scent, and if it's got all of those things, then you're onto a winner. Height is one of the first things you think about when planning the border. In any garden or any border, the top layer is your trees. They provide height, and in the summer months, you get the shade. In the winter months, some trees are really coming to their own, like this Acer or the paperbark maple. A really great tree for a winter garden, particularly on a day where the sun shines through the papery bits like it is today. And then I've paired this up with other plants that have that sort of rusty, sort of warm tones. So in the background, we've got the Hebe James Sterling. In the foreground, we've got the Erica and Sparks. So that's quite a nice, cosy, warm little planting. And I like the fact that that's quite complementary. Then when you go around the corner, you might see something that's very contrasting and clashing. And I quite like the way that that adds a bit more drama and diversity to the planting. So once you get to the mid layer or the shrub layer, things start to get really interesting. That's when you can really play with the form and the texture and colour of different shrubs. This is one of my favourite Daphnes. It's Daphne Bellua Cobhay Debut. And what I like about this one, obviously, is the fact that it's white. Most people think of Daphnes being pink. It's been flowering since before Christmas. By the time it's finished, it will be sort of mid to late March. So you've got 3 months of flower just from this one plant. But the great thing about it is the fragrance. It's really, really strong. You often smell the fragrance of the plant before you get to see it. It's also really good for wildlife as well. If you think about the bees that might be out on a warm day, a plant like this provides a brilliant source of nectar for it. It's just such a great plant. So the stars of the show on the Winter Walk are the Cornus. Probably the favourite, the one that gets the most attention, is this one. It's Cornus sanguinea midwinter fire. It also gets lots of questions asked as to when and how would you prune it. And I always really like to explain to people that the most important thing to start off with is to make sure that it's had a few years to really establish, 3 years after planting, and then you can start to prune it really hard. You don't really need to worry too much about cutting to a bud. It's more important that it's nice and neat and clean. We always aim to do ours just as the leaves are breaking. Then you've got the whole of the season then for that to grow back. So the benefit of cutting them back, obviously, is to get the stronger colour. The sanguinea types, they really do lose their colour quickly on the older stems. So for me, I think it's quite important that you prune them back hard every year. So whilst you're doing this to ensure the display for the next year, you know, you've got a lot of good material here, and this isn't going to go to waste. There's a few things you can do with this. You can make some hardwood cuttings by cutting just above a bud, placing that in the ground to about here. So you've got most of that underground, maximum opportunity for rooting, minimum opportunity for drying out. And if you do 10, you're going to end up with a few new plants. Also, they're really great in a vase with a bunch of daffs. So here at ground level, we've got the real stars of the show, the gems. This is Hellebore Ashwood Garden Hybrids. And what I really like about this is, even though the flower is really dark, it's got even darker speckles and it looks quite metallic. In the foreground, you see I've planted it with cyclamen coum, the winter flowering cyclamen, and I really like that combination of colour, the silver in the leaves, picking up with the speckles in the flower. And you'll probably notice that we've taken off the leaves. We tend to have a good tidy up through here around about Christmas time. So as the flowers come through, you can see them unobstructed from the old foliage. Bulbs are sort of like the grand finale of interest on the winter walk. This is Iris reticulata pixie, really nice sort of inky bluey purple. Sometimes people think they're a bit hard to establish, and they do like a dry point in the dormant period in summer, but planting them underneath a large shrub is a real good place to put them, because that takes out the excess moisture when the bulbs are dormant. And these have been in for 10 to 15 years now. I really hope that people can take some inspiration from these borders into their own garden, no matter how big or small. And I think with careful consideration, bringing a bit of colour to the garden can really extend the season, whether it be a shrub, a tree, or a container by the door. Even on the gloomiest of days, those colours will pop.
Clearly, Russell's garden at Harlow Carr is special. It's astonishing how just a corner of the garden with a few little winter treasures can transform the darkest winter day. But a plant that you certainly won't see in January and February are squashes. Squashes are tender. The first frost will blacken the leaves and, if given a chance, rot the fruit. Well, you can see from the leaves of my squashes growing here, we haven't had any frost yet. So it is time to harvest them, with Halloween tomorrow. But if you've been growing squashes and pumpkins at the same time as me, it'd be interesting to see how yours have ended up, because my results are mixed. This is a variety called Blue Curry. It could be a little bit bigger, could be a little bit bluer, but that will store and be edible. But the very fact that this is the only other one I've got, and normally I wouldn't bother to keep this, shows you that that was a bit of a failure. But it gets even worse with the next variety. I've got 3 squashes in here which just simply haven't ripened. These are one of my favourite pumpkins. It's called Musc de Provence. And by now, they should be 3 times the size of that and a lovely orange. And this is like an unripe tomato. And there are 2 reasons for that, I think. One is because I didn't take off enough foliage to expose them to what light we've had. And the other is beyond my control because we just haven't had enough sunshine. And so it's generally not been a good year for us here at Longmeadow. So these, I'm afraid, regards as a failure. I suspect that these will not be edible because they're just simply not ripe, but I will leave them in a sunny place to see if they will ripen a little bit more. You can see that when I'm cutting the squashes, I'm leaving a section of stem. And that is important because if you want to store them, this is where they will rot first. So if you cut it too short, then that can rot and that will get into the pumpkin. So leave a generous section of stem. Now, although the Musc de Provence hasn't ripened, I've got some blue hubbards that have. Now, how about that? Slight disaster is that the stems have broken off both of them, but that is a good size for a blue hubbard, and it's very beautiful. Now, this is big, but some pumpkins are bigger than others, and I think this is the perfect moment to rejoin the twin brothers, Ian and Stuart Payton, in Hampshire, because they have shared for years the same obsessive focus to grow the world's heaviest pumpkin.
I'm Ian Payton.
And I'm Stuart Payton. We're twin brothers. We grow flowers together for a living.
You know, we both love fishing, both love sailing, but
We
probably...
both like beer.
Yeah, but our real passion is really growing pumpkins.
We were 13 when we first started growing pumpkins. And I remember coming home from holiday. In fact, we're the only kids who wanted to come home on holiday to see our pumpkin. That was about 45 years ago, and we're still trying to be world champions. This year maybe is our chance. This, we call it the PRD house, which is Pumpkin Research and Development. So we've spent an awful lot of time and quite a lot of money to try and get our world record.
Up here we've got shading that comes over. We don't want the plant to be suffering in the hot weather. So we actually have as well on top of that as just belt and braces. We've got mist lines. It's not for watering the plant, it's just for cooling the air down. The real important one is this one here, which is absolutely enormous, and this is the one we're going to be lifting today. Hopefully we're going to be the world champion, so we've grown the biggest pumpkin in the world this year. So the next couple of weeks are the real big shows, and we'll be weighing ours at one of those big shows in Southampton. But there is a chance that we will beat the world record. Who knows? At the end of the day, Stuart and I always say it's not a beauty contest, because some pumpkins are indeed ugly. Some of them are actually rather curvy and sort of curvy-licious. But at the end of the day, it's only weight that matters. I was looking at this earlier, and that is really thin there.
Yeah, just
probably.
Leave it alone. But all right, this is thick.
Yeah, solid up there.
Yeah. We can't do things by halves. It turns into our whole life. Our families don't see us. We're in there at 5 o'clock in the morning. We're in there all day if we get half a chance.
Pumpkin growers do sort of call it a pumpkin sickness, something you need to see a doctor about, actually.
It's a drug. It all begins with this. It's a giant pumpkin seed. It's a bit of a racehorse, and we'll plant that in April, and then we're off.
Our soil that we've got here it's very, very deep soil. It's very deep soil because we actually get a 1.5 ton digger in here and we double dig the soil. So we have 8x4 sheets of plywood and we only walk on there because the pumpkin roots are actually quite fine. We normally have a fan on the stems of the pumpkins because as the stems grow and they get bigger, they split and they exude a little bit of sap. We like to just put a fan on, and that just dries the moisture up.
We don't like this bit. They're all bits where your heart's thumping in. This is one of them.
We're going to half lift it, and then we're going to drop it down again and make sure everything's straight. Sorry, I've got my serious face on.
Ours wouldn't be the first one to break when we lift it, and it definitely wouldn't be the first one to find a mouse who's decided to eat it from underneath.
That's flat as a pancake, Stuart. Absolutely solid.
It's better than perfect.
It's flat, mate. Great. It means nothing.
Our rivals are the ones that chew in the fingernails, not us.
Not us.
We'll see on Saturday.
Here we are, this is a big day today. This is a seriously big pumpkin. So I really hope it's a new PB and a British record minimum.
The British record we beat last year, that was £2,252. And hopefully we're going to smash that one today. And now we're going to be like this all day until they weigh it and let us know if we did well or not. As it stands at the moment, the world record is £2,624, and that came from Belgium. This was a seed from its mother, and this pumpkin is about the same size as it.
Our biggest rivals is in California at £2,363. Anything over that and we're happy.
Right now we're not feeling too bad. Give us another 15 minutes and we'll be in pieces.
This is the pumpkin that we're talking about. This is Ian and Stuart Payton's pumpkin. This is their entry for this year. I'm going to check that it's stable on the scales. So, silence with the crowd. World record is 2,624.6. A new record, 2,269.4. New UK record, guys, well done.
Never mind. Today it's Pumpkins weighed 2269. We'd like to have been a little bit more. Looks like we're going to be second place in the world and a new British record. So yeah, very happy. Story isn't over yet. Won't be over till we're world champions. So well, world record holders. Well, world record holders, yeah. We're going to get it. We'll get it. Got to be positive, haven't we?
Well, Ian and Stuart certainly haven't given up. They broke their own UK record this year and are just 30 pounds short of the world record. And I think if one thing is absolutely certain in this life, they will keep trying until they get it. Now, this year has been strange in lots of ways, but not least for those of us making this programme. Because, of course, we haven't been able to film normally. Because back in March, our families were all roped in. I know that my wife Sarah and my daughter Freya filmed here, and we had Carol's husband Neil filming on his phone. Advili's husband Paul built his own unit, and Arit got her children Freya and Harvey to help her film. But somehow it all happened. And in April, the BBC laid miles of cabling all around the garden, and ever since then, we've been filming here at Longmeadow using these remote cameras. And I have done the whole of the series without seeing or sharing the space with another member of crew. But I do hope that next year that I'm able to see people both working behind the camera and in front in person. Now, this is the last programme, but don't think I'm going to let you off the hook, because here are some jobs, not just for the weekend, but for the winter. If you've got some garden compost that's ready for use, it's a good idea to sieve some now. And then that can be stored in a dry place over winter, ready for use with potting or seed compost in the spring. And the lumps and bumps that you take out can be put under a hedge and act as a mulch. It's a good time of year to give your pruning tools a really good going over. First of all, clean them thoroughly with wire wool, and this doesn't just get rid of rust, but also the accumulated grease from a summer's pruning. Then sharpen them to a really good edge, and I like to use either a sharpening file or a whetstone. Finally, when they're good and sharp, give them a coating of oil, and camellia oil is particularly good for this. Now they're ready for action. It's time for a winter cleanup. Give all your pots, terracotta and plastic, a really good scrub, and this will get rid of all traces of compost, as well as making sure that you have good plant hygiene ready for next spring. And then go through all your tools as well, cleaning them, and if they're not stainless steel, give them an oil so that they don't rust over winter. Once we reach November, then all the pots here in the Paradise Garden come in undercover. It doesn't matter what the weather is doing, because these are all Mediterranean plants and they hate the cold wet of winter. Actually, these eucomias are not Mediterranean. They come from South Africa, but they share that same characteristic. They like to be bone dry over winter, so I'll let these die back and they completely disappear. Don't water them at all over winter, and then start to water them at the beginning of April, and they will start to grow again. Now, in this strange year, one of the really good things that has happened have been all the films that you've sent us of your gardens. We've had over 8,000 of them. It has given us so much pleasure, and I know that you too have really enjoyed it. Sharing gardens is such a good experience. And here are just a few highlights of some of them.
I'm Jade, and I wanted to show you my baby plant army that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks.
I decided to plant some sunflowers and give them away. Right now, we have pumpkin, sunflowers and tomatoes.
We think it's really important to plant flowers in your garden for the bees.
I think of my garden as a bit of floating wilderness, and it's teaching me all the time about the natural world.
It's one of those things that we try and do here is try and grow as many vegetables and crops that have a connection to Bangladesh.
And we've also got the BFG, the Big Friendly Gunnera.
And every year it comes back bigger and stronger.
So I'm going to check out how my seaweed fertiliser is coming on. Absolutely stinks.
And I thought, if Monty could do it, so can I.
Today we're just going to be making a simple planter like this one here. And with a little bit of sun, you have a fountain. Ta-da!
Ta-da! For a really long time, I've wanted my own greenhouse. So this year, I decided I'd make my own.
Back in 2013, my dad sadly passed away, and when we sold his house, I decided I was going to go over and ask if I could rescue his roses.
Today we've come over to listen to the bees in the echium and all the birds in the sycamore tree.
It's lovely to be among other forms of living beings that brought about so much serenity and joy.
And I'm actually aged 93. And if somebody asked me what was my favourite thing, I would have to say gardening.
Oh yeah.
We shall be showing more of your films on social media over winter. But that's the end of this, our last programme this year. Do try and get out into the garden as much as you can over the winter months. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next spring. But until then, from me, the dogs, and all the team, bye-bye.